I was talking with people about this the other day, and it's interesting in terms of how many people actually plan a career in water. And I thought we came to the conclusion that most people fall into water and actually never really get out again. So it's really interesting. So your career tends to develop.
So what did sort of digital look like when you first got involved?
When I worked in Lebanon, we were given this great big massive laptop at the time, and we were the first people who had access to a thing called email. We used to communicate in Anglian Water on radios, so we had people that used to disappear on a Friday afternoon because they went into a radio black spot, so you could never get a hold of them. So technology is really advanced in my lifetime. And I think it's very interesting because you don't then take it for granted. There'll be a lot of people scared around, AI will take my job. AI will not take your job. It will make your job better. It will remove the mundane activities that actually we all get frustrated with. And hopefully it will enable us all to be more creative. I think this is one of the most exciting things that we're currently working on in terms of a real game changer, in terms of enabling frontline people to see real-time information. Discovered Qatium at Aquatech about 3 years ago. We're currently at the exciting phase of trying to get real-time data into the solution. It's a perfect example of what we talked about earlier in terms of our frontline people trying to drive a change within our business. We live in a really dry area within Anglian Water. We are water stressed officially. So how do we actually get our customers to use less of our products? Now, there's not many industries in the world where people want people to use less of their product. And actually, we do.
Welcome to the second season of Distilled. I'm Will Sarni. We have a very diverse group of water leaders, some of which you may not know, who are having a real impact in solving wicked water problems. Distilled is brought to you by Qatium. You can find all of the episodes on Spotify and YouTube. Stay with us. I'm really excited about my conversation with Andy Smith, who is the Smart Water Manager for Anglian Water. Just fascinating journey and his perspective on certainly smart water, but the importance he places and Anglian Water places on the people's side of this. And I am absolutely convinced that I am Andy's American doppelganger, and he is my English doppelganger, because our career choices really tracked fairly close. So great conversation. Absolutely loved it and can't wait to meet him in person. Andy, great to see you. Excited by our conversation. I'm confident it'll be spirited and informative. What I'd love to hear, and I'm sure that our viewers, listeners would love to hear, is your origin story. So, how did you get hooked on water, and, your journey, and if you could talk a little bit about, or maybe a lot about, what you're doing at Anglian and, some of the initiatives and impact you're having as an organization, which I find really fascinating based upon a little bit of research. And then, later on we can talk a little bit about, what's your take on the future of water. But if you could start at the beginning, Andy, that'd be terrific.
Wow. So that takes me back quite a long way now in terms of, so I've got over 40 years working in the best industry I think that there is out there. When you look at what we do, we provide public health services for people, and a crucial service that nobody can live without. And I think that actually is our grounding at all times. But I was talking with people about this the other day, and it's interesting in terms of how many people actually plan a career in water. And I thought we came to the conclusion that most people fall into water. And actually never really get out again. So it's really interesting. So your career tends to develop, and it's so diverse, the opportunities within water as well. You know, a lot of engineers I talk to, you know, are interested initially from the engineering part, but when you look at what we do, it's scientific, it's engineering, it's AI, it's machine learning now. So the career paths in water are absolutely numerous and fascinating. And ultimately, you are so rewarded at the end of every week. I think that's the point, is because you can directly link the work that you do to a purpose. Yeah.
There were two things you just said that really resonate with me. One is, this is about public health, and it's one of the most noble things you can do to be part of ensuring that the public has access to safe drinking water. And when I started my career, one of the co-founders of a groundwater consulting firm said, if you want a career in water, you will have it for the rest of your life, because of what you said, which is it's a public health issue. And there's always a role for that. And it is just, again, such a noble profession. And then your comment about trajectory, I often use a quote by Yogi Berra, who was a catcher for the New York Yankees. And he said, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. And, my career was not intentional. To your point, it's just you sort of take these forks in the road.
That's about being an explorer as well. I think, you need to have an open mind to your career. I think I have the utmost respect to people who say, within 5, 10, 15 years, I'm going to be CEO and all this sort of stuff. But my path's been a lot different. I've always just explored and taken the opportunities. And I think the water industry presents you with numerous opportunities. I haven't always worked for Anglian. My journey started a long time ago with an opportunity, and I was asked to be a draftsman in a private company. So that's where my journey started, and that's when we were still using pen and ink and acetate. And my first opportunity came after 6 months when they said, we're setting up the drawing office as part of a sewer rehab project in Cairo. We're looking for someone to go out for 2 weeks, set up the drawing office, and then come back home. And 2.5 years later, I actually came home. So those are the opportunities that are presented to you, and you either take them or you don't. And I think if I hadn't taken that opportunity at that time, I wouldn't be working in water now. So
Andy, I feel like you're the English version of me, because I started my career working as a draftsman for a groundwater consulting firm. And when they found out I was getting a degree in earth and environmental sciences, they said, forget drafting, we're going to send you out in the field now. Yeah. So, and I love your point about, sort of being curious, like just, always like wanting to learn more. Can you talk a little bit about, what that looked like after, your initial position, and sort of what showed up and what you found appealing about the choices you made?
Yeah, so my natural talents as a draftsman, and very similar to yourself, was that the opportunity came when I was actually setting up that office to actually go and do field work. So I was out then surveying manholes in Cairo, all those sorts of really exciting things you do. And I was 18, so what an opportunity at 18 to actually go and do that type of work. But then when I came back to the UK, that sparked my curiosity, not just in sort of like the field work, but also the benefit you can provide people very, very quickly, and the value that you as an individual can provide. So that sparked my interest in working overseas. And I've had the privilege to work in a number of countries around the world, Malaysia, India, Lebanon, which have all helped me grow as an individual. I think that's the main point. And I am naturally curious just by, every challenge that you come up against, what's the opportunity that actually that challenge presents you as well. So, grasp everything. You will make wrong decisions throughout your career, Will. There's no ifs or buts about that, yeah? And there's opportunities that you might turn down at one particular time, which you might regret, but you can't change that. So just carry on. Always think about moving forward, I think, is the key part for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Always move forward. And you're right about, not every decision is going to play out the way you thought, but you do learn along the way. Yeah, I mean, I have gray hair, which, hopefully reflects that I learned along the way, but
I have no hair, which shows that I've obviously learned a lot. So
you've taken it to a whole other level, Andy. Can you talk a little bit about, some of the positions that you've held over the years? And
yeah, and I suppose that sort of led me to do sort of different work. So that was sort of a wastewater beginning. I returned back to the UK and was doing really exciting things like walkthroughs to surveys in London, Manchester, Liverpool. But then I got more involved in some of the water side. So the company that I worked for, which was a company called Palmer Environmental Services at the time, were actually the company that built the first leak noise correlator for finding leaks in pipes. And to say that's been a technological journey would be an understatement.
Wow.
Our correlator was actually the size of a transit van, not the small things that people carry around now. And we had cable drums to connect the sensors. But that really started to spark my interest in leakage. So I probably then spent the next 20 years of my career really focused on leakage and network management. That's evolved now. So that gave me some great opportunities. And, another one of those chances, I was a leakage delivery manager at Anglian Water, always curious, looking for new ways to reduce leakage, adopted some new technology around smart sort of pressure control, and then was asked to come offline and actually build a business case for that within the business to actually scale that at a wider opportunity. A really daunting prospect at that time in your career, working with a sort of senior director. We got that business case through, and that's actually flourished now into the role I currently undertake in Anglian, which is head of smart water within the water business stream, where we're really looking at how we manage leakage, but also the other opportunities that presents in terms of network optimization, really driving more resilience in our networks, and making sure that actually, coming back to our original point, that what we do is actually sustainable. Right. We are custodians of the environment. The water we abstract, we have to make sure we use wisely. We have to deliver the service for our customers, but also then take that waste away and put that back to the environment in the best way that we can.
Hey, Andy, that's really interesting for a lot of reasons. So what did sort of digital look like when you first got involved? And yeah, if you can just talk about the beginning, because everyone talks about digital now like it's new.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, oh, yeah, I'm into digital because it's the hot new thing. Well, it's sort of a hot new thing that started 2 decades ago. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I find the journey in innovation to be really interesting, and you lived that.
Yeah, it's very interesting. When I go back to the early parts of my career, particularly in Anglian Water and things like that. So if I go back to when I worked in Lebanon, we were given this great big massive laptop at the time, and we were the first people who had access to a thing called email, where we could actually send our reports back. When I worked in Cairo back in the 80s, for instance, we take our phones and our messaging and all this sort of stuff for granted. I used to have a once a week telephone call with my wife, because that was the only time I could book an international line, and we communicated by telex.
Wow.
And then you start to evolve in terms of, the first mobile phone I had was just like this massive, great thing. We used to communicate in Anglian Water on radios, so we had people that used to disappear on a Friday afternoon because they went into a radio black spot, so you could never get a hold of them. So technology is really advanced in my lifetime. And I think I think it's very interesting because you don't then take it for granted.
Right.
There are parts of technology which really frustrate me, even now. So I still believe in picking up the phone sometimes and actually just having an old-fashioned telephone call, because you can relate in a different way. I don't need to message you or email you. I'll just pick up the phone and have a chat and make that human connection. And the human connection is really important to me. I don't like to work in isolation. I like to bounce things off people, and it enables me to be more creative in the solution space that I'm looking for, because I need to understand your problem as well. If you want us to solve the problem, I need to understand what it is, not my take on what your problem is.
Right.
So technology is amazing in terms of what it has enabled us to do. So, lots of talk about digital twins. I would question, if you look at the definition of digital twins, we've had them for a while. EIS for me is a digital twin. A hydraulic model is, whether it's, how you then make that dynamic by the ingestion of some live data is really exciting. And I think we're on the cusp of some really exciting things within Anglian around how we bring live data into a number of our sort of static platforms at the moment to really drive insight in a different way.
Right.
But ultimately, that is about enabling our people to be the best they can be, make the best informed decision operationally, but also from an investment perspective as well.
I really do love that you brought up the people side of the equation. Again, personally, I fall in love with technology, too easily. But what I've come to appreciate, through conversations with, folks like you is it's really the people side of it all that makes it work or doesn't work. It's, digital transformation is really about people. Going back a couple of decades, how did you manage the people side of it? I mean, were people embracing digital back then, or, what level of curiosity, and are how much has changed over, 20 years?
I think it was a lot scarier, actually. I even go back to when I was at school, Will, and there was conversations around the fact that, these things called computers are going to revolutionize your lives. And, you'll only be working 2 days a week because computers will solve all your problems. The rest of your week will be spent down the leisure centre swimming and enjoying life, etc., etc. And I think there's some lessons from that, actually. If you look at our careers, probably in terms of, I wouldn't say computers have actually made my life any less stressful in any way, shape or form. I'm not sitting at the leisure centre 3 days a week, swimming, doing all those great activities that I was promised. I think we just work in a different way. And I think new ways of working is what technology actually unlocks. There'll be a lot of people scared around, AI will take my job. AI will not take your job. It will make your job better. It will remove the mundane activities that actually we all get frustrated with. And hopefully it will enable us all to be more creative. I think that's the point this is where we're brilliant. We are creative, right? As human beings, that is our natural space. So how do we actually become more creative and less mundane and routine in what we do?
Yeah, I agree with you about that, in terms of creativity. And, it's like a whole other set of tools in the toolbox now.
Yes.
From a pad and paper, and a spreadsheet to, these digital tools that, I think in some ways we're still, and maybe that's an ongoing process, Andy, just figuring it out, to a point
it's
about
evolution. I really do. I think it's how we evolve to embrace these technologies. I mean, they won't be fit for everything. I think that's the point is, and I'm a great believer in keeping the human in the loop. And I probably would say that. And a lot of people say, yeah, it's because you're of a certain age and etc. But I do think, again, how do we really provide value? So again, we can come up, and all throughout history, it's humans that have actually come up with those ideas. We've advanced technology. I'm not sure technology is advancing itself now. I still think it needs a human driver. And I still think ultimately it's about purpose for me. It has to fulfill a purpose within your organization. We shouldn't be just embracing technology because everybody says we should. I think we need to understand the interaction with the processes that we have. And most importantly, as we talked about, for the people. So, yeah, again, we've had, in the early days, I suppose, we would deliver technology to people. So you would say, here we go, here's a particular product that we've decided or we've developed, and we now want you to use that. And we were surprised when people didn't naturally do that. If you look at it now, I think we're much more intelligent about the way we go about that. So as I talked before, 10 years ago, I didn't even really know what a change manager was, to be quite honest. Now I'm working with them. And actually, one of the first things we do is bring change people in up front to actually understand and contextualize that problem. Then we can actually deliver the solutions that people actually want. And instead of doing it to people, we're doing it with people.
Right.
And the end users, because you have to have the end user in mind. Yeah. It's like anything, isn't it? If someone buys you something and you don't like it, you don't generally use it. If people interact with you and ask you what you actually want, what you actually like, the chances are you'll get a better gift from someone. So I think that's the way you have to look at it, to be quite honest.
This is such an important point. What you're doing is leading with the people side of this, change manager, but essentially investing in workforce capacity, education, and, tied to your business strategy, your values, your culture, as opposed to here's a thing and it's really going to be great for you and you're going to love it until they don't. So, I just love that you're really leading with the people side of it. And I assume that has been a key part of your success in your smart water management role and technology adoption.
I think it's a key part of my learning. So if I go back sort of like 10 years ago, we had great ideas. I think over the last 10 years, our approach has evolved during that period. So, that engagement with people, I've learned a lot around that. That stakeholder management piece is really, really important. And it's not just about those high level stakeholders. If I look at where we currently are and some of the things we're currently innovating around, actually it's that groundswell of opinion from the frontline teams that actually will make or break a particular project. So what we tried to do is really engage with them, get them to see the benefit of what we're trying to do, work with them, develop it with them. Then I don't need to make the business case. Actually, they make the business case for you. Yeah. So I think because you get that, we want more. So you create desire within your organization. And one of the hardest things all of us have to deal with is change. Yeah. And I know we live in very uncertain times and that will be change, and people get very worried about that. But actually, if people are influencing the change themselves, they're much more comfortable with it. And I think you're more liable to succeed in that space.
Right. That makes perfect sense. To me, that also speaks to leadership in an organization that, leadership, senior management gets that piece of the puzzle, which, obviously requires an investment, beyond just the technology investment. Can you talk a little bit about the types of, smart water digital tech investments that you're making? And then also, touch on what you're doing with Qatium. I'm interested in.
We've been exploring this space sort of in optimization for a while. So, as I sort of alluded to, yes, leakage has always been actually one of the forerunners for technology, because leakage has always been a particular focus area in the UK, very emotive for a number of years politically, but also with customers. So that enabled us to actually look at how we would manage that in a different way. So we started to look at sort of like smart control on control valves, being able to change settings from the desktop, really starting to drive more intelligence around the way we understood how our distribution systems worked. We then invested very heavily in leakage sensors on the network. So again, how do we actually use those to actually give us an area of interest that we could then go and focus our efforts on rather than sort of like the traditional approach of walking around the streets listening to stop taps. And most recently, we've started to really sort of get involved more heavily around, and I'm a great advocate of the SWAN layers. So again, when you think about your physical asset base, if you start to look at those layers, how do you sensor? How do you then communicate, collect that data? How do you then analyze that data, manage that data? And then how do you visualize that for people as well? So we focused in on sensors for a number of years. So within our water distribution system, we've got enhanced pressure sensors out there now. Original use case was really looking at sort of like getting coverage and understanding pressure across the network. But the additional value that's actually given us in terms of understanding where we get breaks in our mains, but also how some large consumers interact with our service and cause transients. That led us down a particular route around transient identification and mitigation as well. So we weren't then just looking at leakage. We were then looking at burst main frequencies within our system and actually moving more towards being proactive than reactive. So, reactive for me is ultimately a failure of our asset. How do we actually get ahead of those failures, really understand what is the true root cause of those failures, and then also provide a much more reliable service to our customers?
Tell me a little bit about the work you're doing with Qatium and how it fits.
Yeah, so I think this is one of the most exciting things that we're currently working on in terms of a real game changer in terms of enabling frontline people to see real-time information. So discovered Qatium at Aquatech about 3 years ago. We had some initial conversations. There was a couple of screens up and I thought, this looks interesting. I did like the way it looked as well. So again, I was drawn in by the black background, etc. Do like a bit of stainless steel and the way that looks. And then we just fostered a relationship in terms of them coming to speak to us, understanding our particular problems, how we could actually implement that solution. And I think over the last year or so, we've been looking at how to explore that solution and what it means to our frontline network technicians. We're currently at the exciting phase of trying to get real-time data into the solution. But the use cases and the desire from our people on the ground for this product is really a groundswell. It's just building and building momentum all the time. So it's a perfect example of what we talked about earlier in terms of our frontline people trying to drive a change within our business, which is so rewarding personally.
I love that you have very much a two-way conversation with your customers. So your Keep It Clear initiative and then the Drop 20. I think that's brilliant. So can you just touch briefly on what those two programs are?
Yeah, so Keep It Clear is about obviously keeping our sewers clear. And actually what we found over a period of time is that, a lot of sewer blockages are caused by people, I would say, mistreating the toilet. So again, companies and the evolution of flushables, should we say, in terms of flushable wipes, etc., is a real convenience, but a real inconvenience for us in terms of the amount of blockages that they actually cause in sewers. So, and the only way we're going to actually deal with that is be proactive. So coming back to being that proactive piece again, in terms of having a real conversation with our customers so they actually understand the impact of what they're doing as well. And we've had great success over the years in terms of reducing the amount of blockages in our sewers from just engaging with communities in a different way. And ultimately, these are the communities we serve. So again, why wouldn't we engage with them in a different way and have a two-way conversation? So again, it's about education, how we go about educating people. Drop 20 is about, again, coming back to the big challenge of water in terms of we live in a really dry area within Anglian Water. We are water stressed officially. So how do we actually get our customers to use less of our products? Now, there's not many industries in the world where people want people to use less of their products. And actually, we do. And this is about, yet again, that sustainability piece for us in terms of, the resources we have are precious, and we need to treat them as if they are precious and have a different approach to that. So Drop 20 is all about encouraging people just to drop 20 litres per person per day. And even within the organisation, we all made a commitment that we would do that. So yet again, with the evolution of smart meters, I think that's really good as a customer tool, and the way they can then interact and understand their consumption. How we gamify some of that would be really interesting, so there's nothing like the human competitive nature. Wouldn't you love to be compared, or an email saying you're not as water efficient as your neighbor? So that should then truly drive a different approach to how people interact with water, because it's always been the unseen service. You turn the tap on and you expect it to be there. We only ever had interaction with customers when there's a problem or when bill drops. So once a year when your bill drops, that would be our way of engaging. You need to completely change the way you do that. It's constant messaging, different channels are now open to us. So how we maximize the use of those to engage with customers is really, really important.
Listening to you, it just really strikes me that says so much about your culture, your leadership, your vision as an organization, which is, it ties into how you view tech. It's like tech is good, but we're investing in people first. So very much in alignment. What's your take on the future of water? However you want to define it.
And yet again, it comes back to that career piece, doesn't it? I have a real passion for water, right? And I think most people who work in the industry do. I think yet again, if I look at it from a world level, there's so many people who still do not have access to safe drinking water and actually sewage with dignity. I think that's the whole point. And we're doing a lot of work. We've got a beacon project within Anglian, which really working in Nepal, which is leading and trying to transform the way we deliver sustainable goal number 6. So I think it's the sustainable piece for me. We have to make sure that we all come together, work together around how we conserve this precious resource we've got. It is life-giving. So many people die every day because they don't have access to safe drinking water. And I think, as water specialists or water lovers, whatever you want to call us, we have a great opportunity to shape that future. Yes, there are challenges. We all know there's challenges. There's loads of uncertainty at the moment. Yeah. We live in a volatile world. Every day at the moment, I switch on the news and I'm literally taken aback. With what's happening. But yet again, it is the most precious resource we have. People talk about power, etc., but water is the one that is life-giving. That is absolutely clear for me.
So Andy, where can people find out more about who you are and what you're doing, and the amazing things that you're doing at Anglian?
So we do have our website at Anglian, which is anglianwater.co.uk. I'm also on LinkedIn. Anglian Water also has a very good presence on LinkedIn. So I'm down as Andy Smith. But yeah, again, I think one of the things we always do is we pride ourselves in promoting the good stuff that we do. And actually taking that little bit of time to celebrate success. So I think,
Andy, a million thanks. I feel like I know you.
It's been a real pleasure, and we could probably talk for a number of hours after this. Our viewers won't actually enjoy it as much as we would probably.
Well, we need to figure out where we can do that and have a longer conversation over a pint or two. And I will follow your lead. or go for a spin in a Spitfire,
Yeah, that would be great. Absolutely brilliant.
Awesome. Andy, a million thanks. Love the conversation with you.